Hi, I'm back in the evening with another diary entry. This one is so long that it would probably have been a standalone anyway, so it won't be as short as the last one, despite my resolution to make things shorter. It's the diary entry of the 18th of February, 1906. So a big topic today is, again, psychosomatic illness. And I wouldn't spend so much time on it, except that it was a thing that manifested itself throughout Dmitri's life. If indeed that was what was happening and it was psychosomatic, it tended to happen when any time when there was a very stressful or even traumatic event. And so I think, for instance, after the disastrous battle that Dmitri was involved in August 1914 and the retreat from East Prussia during the First World War, and then a couple years later, the Rasputin assassination and the aftermath of that, and even at Sanatorium Schatzalp, when he absolutely had tuberculosis, but there were other symptoms and other things he experienced that may or may not have been a response to the stress and the anxiety he was under. So my own take, I'm certainly not a psychologist. You may be wondering why even do the diaries of a 14-year-old. But to me, I've had the opportunity of observing children from the standpoint of an uncle with almost as many nieces and nephews as Dmitri had aunts, although a lot of them are children of my cousins and of my friends. And an uncle can be more observant than a parent. And I also have 7 godchildren, and so I've really enjoyed being able to observe over the years. And I also had, or have, he's alive and well, a brother who came into my family when he and I were both about 13 years old, who'd been more or less abandoned by his parents, who had brought him to the U.S. and then gone back to their home country. So there was that, and also some of the people around me. I've been working as a kind of language consultant for years now with a Russian woman, an American Russian woman, who is a child psychologist by training. And I have a sister who is a student, who is a counselor in a high school and also at the same time in a middle school and an alternative school. She may just be in the high school now. But all of that together, and I played an very active role in one of my nephew's lives when his father was working in another state and he was having real difficulties, and he often reminds me of Dmitri. So I'm finding these diary entries extremely interesting because there are so many reference points to my own experience and my own observations that they're really fascinating to me. And so I should say one more thing before I dive into the diary entry, is that everything Dmitri describes in this diary entry, up until the very last line, is something that actually happened the day before, on the 17th. Actually, he's writing this diary entry at 8:40 in the morning on the 18th. So yes, everything he's talking about happened on the 17th. And as you know, if you watch the video for the 17th, he was sick on the 17th. He vomited, he was anxious, he was nauseated, he was dizzy. Those are the words that he uses. And yet he's going out and playing with his little friend Borya. And so We will find out in this diary entry what happened during the rest of that day that might have caused him to be so ill. All right, 18th February 1906. Yesterday I confessed to Yanishev. He is a very good confessor. I didn't cry at all, though 1 minute I suddenly wanted to. Maria went first, then me, then Aunt Minnie, etc. Misha was remarkably nice to me yesterday, but he's always nice, but especially yesterday. I apologized to him, and it seemed to surprise him very much. We went with Aunt Alex and Uncle Nicky. Aunt Alex rode in a carriage with Maria, Dmitri's sister, with Maria, Olga, and Tatiana, and I went with Uncle Nicky in a 4-seater sleigh. It was terribly funny. Misha gave me a new knife yesterday, just like the one I lost. Aunt Minnie is not at all as sad as I would have thought she would be. She looked good and laughed during dinner yesterday. My stomach didn't hurt at church yesterday, thank God, so I was able to stand quite tolerably well, though that unpleasant feeling in my throat continues, but it's much better. I slept very well here, though the rooms are very uncomfortable, and I made a gaffe about it yesterday, telling Misha, who came to escort me to my rooms, that they were uncomfortable. But this is Gatchina, so it's clear that the rooms are not cozy, but Misha didn't seem very pleased with what I said. I've been ordered to go see Aunt at 8:45, and now it is only 8:30, so there's time. Yesterday, 15 minutes before we left, Miss D said to me in the big palace, "You haven't said a single prayer, Dmitri," in a tone that was even a little comical. I said no and walked away, rather expecting a storm, but thank God there was nothing. But she said to Maria that she was so sorry that we were taking communion together, but that it was the first time that she was in one place and we were in another at such a moment, and so on. I get a little twinge in my stomach before communion, and I'm afraid that I'll end up with an upset stomach. We leave today at 12:30 to go back to Tsarskaya Selo, 8:40 a.m. In case you didn't pick it up, I'm not sure where he first says it, all of this was taking place in Gatchina, which was another kind of upscale suburb near to St. Petersburg, and it was where the Tsar's younger brother lived and where his regiment was based. So the big moment arrived on the 17th, the confession. And at one point, he almost cried. But this particular confessor was able to put him at his ease. And so here, of course, I think about all of the upset and illness of the day before, and whether that wasn't perhaps what had, the idea that he would have to go to confession was perhaps what had precipitated it. So Misha, Dmitri's idol at that time, the man he so much looked up to, another young Grand Duke and the Tsar's younger brother. Misha was remarkably nice to me yesterday. Very typical statement on Dmitri's part, even with someone he's known for years. He always seems to be a little surprised that people are nice to him. I wish I knew why. But he even apologized to Misha. Unfortunately, he doesn't say why he apologized to Misha, but it surprised Misha. All right, so Aunt Minnie, I mentioned last time that I wasn't sure if it was his aunt who was married to Grand Duke George, or if it was actually the Dowager Empress, because they were both named Maria and they were both called Minnie. And I'm afraid I can't enlighten to you as to this statement about Dmitri being surprised that she didn't look sad, whichever Aunt Minnie it was. Why should she look sad? I don't know. If any of you know anything about either the Dowager Empress or Maria Georgievna, and you can provide a context for that, please do post. So Misha was remarkably nice to Dmitri, but was Dmitri remarkably nice to Misha? I'm afraid not. So he made one of these comments of his that offended people, and that I suspect he probably did knowingly and not innocently, although it may be that in some instances he was simply impulsive. And here again, he reminds me so much of one of my nephews, because my nephew, he was younger than Dmitri. He was closer to Borya's age. He was about 8, and he finally outgrew it, thank God. But every time he would go to a new person's house, he would say something like, "Why does your house smell like spaghetti?" And most of the time people would laugh. I mean, I guess it's not a huge problem if you've just cooked spaghetti and your house smells like spaghetti. But I think in his case there was something defensive about it, that he wasn't sure. He was a little boy who was convinced that people didn't generally like him. So kind of like Dmitri in that respect. So I think he figured he would get the first lick in and put them a little bit on the defensive. But he did actually outgrow it. And, you know, if any of you know about what Misha's home or palace was like in Gatchina, maybe you can comment. But I don't know anything about it. So I guess just the inference would be, or what I would guess, is that maybe it was older than the palaces in Tsarskaya Selo, or if not older, then simply hadn't been modernized. Maybe it had smaller rooms. I don't know. All right, so Dmitri has been ordered, as he says, to go and see his aunt, who I assume was Aunt Ella, at 8:45. But he doesn't seem to be worried about that, so I won't worry about it either. And he makes this comment about getting a little twinge in his stomach before communion. So that's interesting, you know. He definitely seems to get a twinge in his stomach before confession, if my interpretation of that is right. But why before communion? Maybe a guilty conscience? I mean, he'd just been to confession, so I wouldn't think so. But, you know, in the Orthodox Church, as in the Roman Catholic Church, communion is not just a symbolic act. It's the sacrament beyond all sacraments. And you're taught to take it very, very seriously. And that could definitely give a person a twinge in the stomach. I don't think I myself have experienced that, but I've definitely been in line to take communion and thought, should I really do this? Am I really worthy of it? And I suppose everybody who takes it seriously has that thought, a little twinge of the brain rather than of the stomach. So good for him if that was the reason. And just one more thing, his remark that with Miss June, so here he is being a little defiant and a little flippant with her. It makes him angry. We already know that when she criticizes him. The last time it was for not writing a letter to his Aunt Ella. And this time it's for not having said a prayer. And he's 14, of course that's going to irritate him. So he just sort of shrugs his shoulders and says, yeah, that's right, I haven't said a prayer. He says no and walks away. And he's expecting there to be a little mini explosion, a storm as he puts it. But yeah, Miss June doesn't seem to have been one to stick her neck out in that way. That was more something that Laming would have done, or one of the aunts. So he gets away with that one. But what I wanted to say is when he writes about it and says that the tone of her voice was even a little comical, and that's something that he does so consistently throughout the diaries and his letters. And one of his favorite ways to describe things, even very serious things, would be to say, well, it was like something from a comic opera. And I have a theory about that. You're probably not surprised. I think it was a way that he had learned to not lose his temper by putting a little distance between himself and whatever it was that had happened that had made him angry or annoyed. that at least in retrospect he would look back and he would write, well, that was funny. And you'll see that in a big way tomorrow with a very upsetting incident. So hold that thought, as we go along, and whether you agree with my theory or not. So just a quick word about what we will encounter tomorrow. It's quite a dramatic turn of events. This time it's Nicholas II who really gets incensed with Dmitri, really gets angry with him, and actually even goes a little further than George Laming went with the little slap that Dmitri described. So come back and find out about that, and I'll see you then. Bye.